Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Authors on Mission podcast, where we discover how experts can turn their experiences into powerful books that change lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission, and today I am so excited to introduce Julie Randall, author of the best-selling memoir, Patient 71. When Julie was diagnosed with terminal cancer, she made a promise to her teenage daughters that she would survive. Not only did she keep that promise, but she turned her journey into a book that's been inspiring readers across Australia and the United States. And I'm so excited to talk more about how she created that book and her journey so far. So Julie, welcome to our podcast. We're so happy to have you.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here too.
Yeah, I'm so excited. We've been trying to have this for a while now because I've been so excited to talk to you about your journey and your experiences. And I'm glad that we can finally meet here together to chat about it. So here we are.
Yep, here we are. We got it done finally.
Yeah, to all of our listeners, it's really funny to think about, on this podcast, I have authors from all over the world pop on. And it's always so much fun to figure out, like where you are in the world. And the funny thing is, right now for me, it's 8 p.m. and it's snowing outside and it's cold, and here Julie is, and she's in nice warm Australia in the middle of the day. I'm pretty jealous. I should have flown out there.
The fan blowing.
Next time I'm flying out there and we'll have the podcast in person. But anyway, to get down to business, I would love to start today, if you don't mind, introducing yourself a little bit more to our audience, talk a little bit more about your story. I gave a very brief introduction, but I know there's a lot more to it. So if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about what it was like to have that extremely unfortunate diagnosis and how you came to be patient 71 on a trial that was originally only meant for 70 people. What was that all like? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I'll try and condense this. So I was just about to turn 50. And I wasn't very happy about it. So I went on to discover that worrying about turning 50 was the least of my worries, actually. I had a birthday party, even went as far as calling the birthday party my 4010th, because I couldn't bring myself to say it was my 50th. So I had a party, had a great time. 4 days after the party, I'm driving to work, and it was winter in Australia then, but sunny and beautiful, a little bit crisp. And I just remember driving to work that day and practicing gratefulness. Like I was literally saying out loud in my car, I'm so lucky. I was a wife and a mother on the northern beaches of Sydney, 2 daughters, a husband and a puppy dog. And I was thanking the universe for everything that day. And even my husband got a mention. So that explains what a great morning I was having. And I was going to work, and I knew we were going out for lunch that day, and I was just so happy and so grateful. And little did I know what was coming. So I went to work in the city, in the CBD of Sydney. I know you haven't been to Australia, you said, but are you familiar with the Opera House and Sydney Harbour Bridge, of course? Yep. So that's where we were lunching. I went down, so I had lunch with some colleagues down there. Just once again, beautiful scenery, beautiful day, and walked back to work. Got to my office, went up to the 5th floor, and one of my colleagues asked me what I'd had for lunch, and all of a sudden I couldn't answer, couldn't speak, and I just knew in that split second that I was in big trouble. I just knew by the way my brain felt, and I'd never had that feeling before. And he asked me to sit down. He said, sit down in the foyer, and then my world just went black. I came to maybe, I don't even know. I still don't know how long I had a massive brain seizure on the floor in the office. And, I've never asked because I don't want to know. And I woke up to paramedics on their knees. My head was hanging down. They're trying to rouse me. And they're saying, Julie, Julie, Julie. And I could hear them, but I couldn't respond. And finally, slowly but surely, I lifted up my head and I could see the paramedics and I could see my colleagues standing there with their jaws nearly dropping to the ground. I was in the foyer and I had had a massive brain seizure. And my head was, I just remember my head hanging down and I could hear my name being called out. And I could see that there were two paramedics. I could see their legs, their shoes and their legs and their uniform. And they were calling out my name and Julie, Julie, Julie. And then I couldn't respond at first. And then slowly but surely I lifted my head and, saw my colleagues with their jaws dropping to the ground. And as I said, I'd had a massive brain seizure right there in the office. And so they put me on a trolley, basically, and as they were wheeling me out, I made light of the subject because I said, that's it, I'm never eating Chinese food again, because that's what we'd had for lunch. But I knew in my gut that something major was wrong with me. So we went to the emergency, sirens on, the whole bit. I remember just feeling so ill. And so we go to emergency and my husband arrives, and not long after one of my daughters arrived, and my husband's saying, oh, you're just really tired you've been partying, for your birthday, you're really tired. And I'm like, yeah, I really wish it's that, but I don't think it is. And so I had 24 hours of, well, probably not the whole 24 hours, but I had tests and MRIs and CTs and all that sort of stuff. And then I was put into a ward, had to, wait overnight until the afternoon following at about 5 p.m. Oh, every time I say this, at about 5 p.m. Sorry, oh God, the doctors.
Virtual tissue.
My husband was with me, and the doctor walked in, and he had like paramedics either side, and he just said, Julie, you have tumours in your brain, your lung, both lungs, your liver, your pancreas, and all through your lymph nodes. And then he went on to say, it's not good. I felt like saying, no shit, as if I thought that was good. And then he started, I just went into some sort of, I don't know what, blackout type thing that I couldn't listen anymore. And he was trying to talk to me and my husband. And then I just got out of bed and I still had the hospital gown on, and I just ran. And I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I ran to the elevators. My husband ran behind me. And then we got in the car, and I'll never forget that ride home from the hospital, because it was a Friday night and we went through the city and there were people hanging out of bars and drinking and having fun. And as I saw it was, you're rehearsing for the weekend and I'm rehearsing how to tell my two teenage daughters that their mother's dying. And that was my trip home. And it was absolutely surreal because I was training for over 45 touch football state level tournament that day. In the morning I'd been out running. So to hear that news, the shock was just unbelievable. So so that's what I had to do, go home, and that's when the whole promise thing came to fruition, because I walked in the door and I didn't know where to go, so I went up to my bedroom, and then I heard footsteps coming up to my bedroom, and I know my kids' they don't live with me anymore, but at the time I knew which footsteps were which kid. And basically my eldest daughter, I told her, I said, I'm sorry, and I didn't really give her the gory details. I just said, I have cancer, and she just started wailing, and she just started saying, no, Mum, no, Mum, no, Mum. And then my other daughter, my younger one, came up and she sobbed into my chest, and I just said, I'll fix this, I promise. I promise I'll fix it. And the little voice in the head, the little monster said, good luck with that. And yeah, so that's what happened in the early stages.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I think that the way that you tell this is, it just goes to show how strong you've become from this experience, because you've had to say this to many different people, I'm sure. I mean, let alone in your book, but also on many other interviews. And yet it's very clear that each time it still impacts you, and it's very hard to talk about. So I just want to thank you for being able to share that with us, because I think it's important that we understand what you went through in order to become who you are today. So again, thank you so much. I know that wasn't easy. I wish I could send your virtual tissue through the computer. But
it happens every time. It happens every time. It usually happens at the part where I tell my daughters. So this was a surprise, and when it happened this time, about hearing the news,
Yeah, well, I guess, kind of branching off of that though, the way that you've been able to tell this story goes to show almost, the way that you frame it in the light of contrasting it from everyday normal moments, such as, that nice lunch you were having, the sights of everybody else on that Friday night going about their usual Friday routines. The way you contrast it between the everyday life and what you're experiencing is also an amazing way that you tell it, because it makes it more raw and vulnerable. And I can imagine that's also how you translated that when you went ahead to write your book. Would that be correct in how you approached it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And then I've always been, my family's a very humorous family. We all just love laughing. We think, we make funny things out of things that aren't funny. So through the book, I also make sure that I have moments where people can have a bit of a chuckle and a laugh, so it's not too dark as well. And the funny part about it is obviously I survived this. Otherwise I wouldn't have, written the book. So I think that's good for people to, at least she survived. Otherwise it could be very sort of dark reading. But yeah, I think we need to be real, authentic and real in this world. I can't be anything else. This happened to me at 50 years old, so I well and truly, had everything. I was who I was by then. However, I've got to say, I've found more of me since that I didn't even know I had.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible to think how even the most tragic things that could happen to you, the things that tear you apart, there's ways to build from that and grow from that. And you never know the next, whatever's waiting around the corner as soon as you overcome these obstacles. And I know for you at the time, it was probably beyond words, just you don't even know what to expect. But looking back now, it's nice to know that you grew from it, you wrote a story and a book about it to help others going through this. And here you are now on podcasts and sharing your story and living life to the fullest. So I think that's
yeah. I'm a keynote speaker and all things that if you had have asked me when I was 49, do you think you could ever get up on stage in front of 1,000 people, or could you write a book? I'd say, are you dreaming? And look what's possible. Look what's possible.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know, I'm sure that all of our listeners right now could pick up your book and they'll know exactly the step-by-step of what you went through with the treatment and the study. And I guess what I would like to know for the sake of our podcast is, what was the moment that you decided, you know what, I'm going to start writing my book? Was it during the course of treatment? Was it after? Was there a specific event that you'd be like, I need to put this on paper?
Okay, well, I'll tell you what happened. What happened was, after I was diagnosed and then went to a professor, that's another harrowing story, because another doctor, a local oncologist, had told me that there was, because it was melanoma. It turned out it was stage 4 advanced melanoma, which still is, but back then no one survived it. And I couldn't find one survivor in the world. I went looking for some sort of mentor or hero to, that I could look up to and say, well, somebody's done it. And at the time, to my knowledge, no one had, and I couldn't find a mentor or a hero. And then I realized, Julie, you're going to have to be the one. You're going to have to be the hero that other people look up to, the mentor. So you have to survive this. You have to be the first to survive this, which was quite a daunting fact to come to terms with. So I was offered chemotherapy, and I was told in no uncertain terms, this is not going to save your life. This has a very small chance of buying you a bit more time. So I thought, well, I have to give that a go because I need more time to hatch a plan to actually stay alive, for good, for a long time. So I went on the chemotherapy and laying in the dark one night, sweating. I went into menopause, by the way. I went on to these 2 chemotherapies that I wasn't told was going to throw me into menopause. So I'm sweating, not knowing why. And so I lay in bed one night and I said, this is the universe. If you get me through this, I promise, another promise, I promise I'll write a book to help others. And then I also said, I promise I'll get on stage and tell my story and give hope and inspiration to others. So there it was. There was the promise. Now, I wasn't even good at English. My brother reminded me of that. How did you write a book? You weren't even good at English. But I'd made that promise. So as time went on and I begged and pleaded to get into this clinical trial in the United States, and they told me no for 3.5 months. I was only given 9 months to live. And so every day was important, and they just kept telling me no, that I wasn't an American citizen. It was only for American citizens. Then, no, you're not in our health system. What if you die here? All of this came back at me. And finally, they said, no, we're full. The trial is full at 70 patients. And I just wouldn't give up and basically said, I may or may not have read the Hippocratic Oath over the phone to say, it's basically, if you've got something you think you can help me. So they'd been doing this clinical trial. They just started. They were working with advanced patients who were going to die anyway. Why not start with the people who are probably going to die anyway? So finally, I got a phone call and, they were sick of me harassing them, and so I became patient 71 and they let me join their trial. So I lived and moved to America, had to leave friends and family behind. My husband came with me and one of my daughters for a little while because she just freaked out when I was leaving, and she was doing her final year at school. So we took one, had to leave one. It was horrendous to say goodbye because I didn't know if I was going to come back. And so basically I lived over there and went through the trial. And no sooner had we got there than we started asking, could we come home? Could we bring the drug home? And then my husband somehow, he kept looking at emails for practicing emails for the drug company. We knew who the drug company was, to try and get to someone to say, my wife's not just patient 71, because they don't even know your name in the clinical trial. You're just a number. And he said, my wife's not just a number. And she, and then finally we got the okay to come back and bring the drug back home. I tell you this because then when I came back home, things were looking good, but still they didn't have any long-term data to tell me I was going to survive. They just didn't know. And so when I came back home, I was merrily going about my way, and then my little mind monsters, as I call them, some are nice, some are mean, said, hey, remember you said you were going to write that book to help other people? And I went, oh yeah, yeah, I did, but it's like my mind's like, no, you promised to write that book. And so one day I just sat down and I just started writing, and I wrote the date. That's how I started. It was June 21st, 2012, and then boom, on it went. And I just told myself, if you can tell a story to someone and you can write a story. And that's what I told myself to get started. Wow. And then it went on.
First off, I mean, I know that the whole story again is just so difficult to share, so thank you for that. But honestly, again, it speaks to how strong you are, and not only that, but your determination too, and your families as well, because you didn't just say, oh, well, like they don't have enough space for me, I guess I need to find another solution. You made that solution work. You kept at it, and you made it happen. And not only that, but the way that your husband supported you too, and making sure that, you know, you're not just a number, you're a person. All of that is incredibly powerful and really important that you're able to share that in your book, because so many people, whether it be they're struggling with, you know, conditions such as yours or any other challenge in their lives, you can't just give up and take it as it is. You were strong and you fought through it. So that's incredible. You could do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Sometimes even now, telling the story, I think, did that really happen? Did that really happen to me? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's been so long now that in some ways I'm sure it might even feel like another world, like another lifetime. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
You know,
12.5 years now.
Wow. You never know how time flies like that. But, you know, the other day you shared with me an email from some of the doctors that you used to work with too, a letter from Dr. Erba, and, you know, just going to show that no matter how much time passes, you're still leaving an impact. Would you like to share a little bit more about that email and how those relationships with your doctors really?
Yeah, I actually tried to find that a minute ago and print it out, but I didn't get around to it. So he basically is retiring this year. Interestingly, he's 71, which I had to say, hey, this is a coincidence. You're 71, patient 71. And he just wrote me this beautiful message to say, I just wanted to tell you that I'm retiring. And you've probably got the words there right in front of you. But he basically said that, in a nutshell, that my determination was the reason I survived. And of course I needed the drug. You know, I needed the drug. You know, people say, oh, you know, it's science. But it wasn't just science for me, because I literally had to survive for 9 months, and I was supposed to be dead to get to the US, you know, and get on this clinical trial, and just beg every day for them to take me. And he just said in this letter that it was my determination, and what a difference basically that I made to them, because not only did I stay there and go in the trial, I actually went back and spoke for them and raised money for them to get new housing and all that sort of stuff. So he just thanks me for my philanthropy as well. And he talks about a woman that came in to the hospital, and she was from a drug company, and they were doing a look-see, walking around, and she had my book with her, and she told him that my book inspired her. She'd lost a daughter. I think the story goes she'd lost a daughter through something, and they wanted to start a foundation, and that my story gave her and her husband hope and inspiration to go on and do that. And I mean, that one thing makes my story worth it, and makes the effort of, you know, everything I went through and the effort of writing the book. However, Danielle, I've had hundreds of things like that, and my husband says, don't say that. I say, I'd go through that again just to help the people that I've helped. And he's like, I wouldn't. But I stay in touch with all of them. The places, it's Providence Cancer Centre. The staff stay the same, which says so much for who they are. And I consider them my American family, actually.
I mean, hey, you know, when you're going all the way around the world you hope that you can find a family like that to support you. And that's just incredible that you had that. And, you know, it just gives hope to anybody else in the same situation that you'll be able to find that support and you know, a team to guide you through it and, you know, help whatever you need. And it's great that you had that relationship with them.
Yeah, I really do. It took a while. It was lonely, I'm not going to lie. And my husband was flying back and forth, but so I'd see them when I went into the hospital, and it took time to develop that outside, seeing them outside it. And now, you know, when they come over here, someone flies over here, I catch up with them, show them around Sydney. It did take a while, but it was so worth it. so worth it.
Right. Yeah, I get that a lot. So one thing that you mentioned is that this wasn't the only letter that you got from somebody or experience of somebody who was inspired by your book. You get inspirational message back from people all the time. So I think it just goes to show again how meaningful and powerful and important your book is. Now, I kind of want to say to anybody listening right now who is also going through these experiences, they might also be inspired now to write a book just like you. You mentioned how difficult it was to put all this onto paper and re-experience it through writing. What advice might you have to give to our listeners today who, might be having trouble talking about difficult topics like yours? What kind of strategies did you use when going over all this to get in your mind while writing?
I literally just went through the emotions while I was writing, and if I wanted to cry, I cried. And I cried a lot, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And there's nothing wrong with crying. And it's great because it helped me actually download all those emotions. Some crying in places where I didn't cry at the time. And it was cathartic. And I absolutely loved writing that book. And every time I'd sit down to write, I had this feeling of I was home. It took 55 years or however it was for me to realise that. And yeah, I would just say to anyone who's thinking of doing it that, yeah, don't be afraid of the emotions. Don't be afraid at all. It's a great way to get through that. Yeah.
It's extremely important because, you're saying just be raw, be authentic, pour out your heart and soul into your writing. And that's really what makes good writing, a great memoir, right? It's the only way your audience can know how you're feeling. The more emotion and the more authentic you're being, the more receptive the audience is going to be to you, the more they're going to relate to you and hear your message. So that's incredible.
Of course. Yeah. I think intrinsically, as I say, I'd never written anything before, but intrinsically I knew that I wanted to take the reader on a journey with me, and I wanted it to be like I was sitting there and just telling them the story, and yeah, I wasn't going to sugarcoat anything or think, I can't say that because that might make them too sad or whatever. I just wanted them to be with me. And so many readers come back to me and said, I just felt like I was talking to a friend or talking to someone. And I'm like, great, that's what I was out to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely powerful that you were able to do that. Did you have any assistance while writing, or did you have a team of, readers and editors to help you, or did you kind of just, naturally use what what came to mind? For example, you said your brother always said, you're always bad at English. I mean, I think that was an important thing that you mentioned before, because a lot of our listeners today might be thinking the same thing, right? I have a story to tell, but I'm a bad writer. I mean, I could speak to that myself, knowing that I'm somebody who helps people with those disbeliefs. But what did you do when, you heard that, and how did you go
luckily he said that after he read the book. So, and not before. Like, he didn't say that while I was writing the book, and it was very positive. He said, I can't believe you wrote that. Such an amazing book. So he was encouraging me, but then did remind me, which is fine. And I like that too, Danielle, because so many people put themselves in a box of, I can't do that. I couldn't do that, because back when I was in grade 5, a teacher said to me, you're not good at this, or I mean, we all evolve, we all change. And I just believe, as I said, I can tell a story. I can tell someone my story. I can say, hey, this happened to me, and I can write. So I can write the story. And I encourage anyone that has a story to put it down and write it. Don't even think about the end result. Just do it. And then see what happens. And to answer your question before, I had no team. When I finally got a publisher, I had an editor, just one editor, and that was great. but I purposely didn't try and learn to write or take any classes or read lots of the memoirs, because I would have started judging myself against those people. And if I started taking classes, I was worried that then I would try to, do something like write differently to how I felt like I needed to write, if that makes sense. I'm not saying it's not a great thing. I think it is a great thing. And I want to take more classes because I want to write other types of books. At the time, I just felt I will just procrastinate. I need to just authentically write this, if that makes sense.
Oh, it definitely does. And I know that a lot of my clients that I've had in the past feel the same way. They don't want their writing to be changed in any way by trying to follow proper formatting or proper grammar. And that's, why you had an editor and a team of people that
Exactly.
Help you, right now, write right now and clean it up later, right? Because it's about that raw emotion that you mentioned before. It's about getting the experience right, telling it your way. Then worry about the fine details later on. I love that.
Yeah. And one of the best moments of my writing career was when I saw the editor, and I was told, she's harsh from my publisher. The editor's pretty, the editor you're going to have for your book's pretty hard. I'm like, oh, no. And the message I got back from this editor, and I've obviously still got it, was one of the best days of my life. She said something like, Julie Randall is officially amazing. She takes you on a roller coaster story. I laughed out loud. I cried. I laughed out loud. And then she said, and her writing style is really, I think like cool and easy to read sort of thing. It was really, really nice. And that's all you want. And I thought, okay, I did go down the right path writing that book, and I'm okay at writing.
Hey, you knew from the start that you wanted to write the book. You knew and you promised yourself, if I get through this, I will share my story. So in a way, it's like, even if you had a fear of writing, you just had to do it. And hearing that praise and validation from somebody else at the end of the journey, it's just a little cherry on top, like knowing.
It was the icing on the cake for me. And when you put a lot of effort in, anybody will know it takes a lot of time and effort to do it, and concentration, but it's so worth it. So worth it in the end. It's, one of the best things that I've achieved in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. A best-selling book on this topic, a way that many people can benefit, like we mentioned before. You're getting messages all the time from people who are inspired by your writing. So, it's great to probably know that you have left that sort of impact. Kind of branching off of that, I'd like to talk a little bit more about, what's inside the book and the content. So, for example, I flipped through it a bit and I read through it, and, one thing that kind of stuck out to me is a passage that went, "The carnage that you would leave behind is scarier than dying." And to me, that was something that kind of resonated, because I was thinking to myself, what do we leave behind at the end of our time, right? For you, you're leaving behind this incredible book and your experiences, and of course, everything else you've done, your family, your loved ones. But can you speak a little bit about that, and how sort of our legacy and what we're leaving behind is so important for us to think about? A little bit of, a deep question here, but.
Sure. Yeah, so going back to that night sweating in my bed, apart from those promises I made, I started asking myself, like, have you done everything you wanted to do? How have you lived your life? Have you been, given enough back to the world? Have you, like, all these questions? And then I realised, no, I haven't. There's all these things that you say I'll do later. And then when you're hit in the face with there might be no later, in my case it was there will be no later, was how it was presented to me. That's sadness in itself, regardless of anything else, that you haven't lived to your full potential, I guess is the way I'll put it. And it's like, oh. So then I promised that I would now, live to my full potential. But when I the realisation of dying when you've got teenage daughters and the carnage of them not having a mother, we were a very close family, my husband not having a wife, and just the thought of those three getting on without me and my girls not having a mum to get through their teenage years into their 20s and that sort of stuff scared me more than the fact that I wasn't going to be around, because, I mean, once you're gone, I suppose. I mean, we all have different thoughts on that, and, you know, I'd like to think that there's more, but obviously that's a different, on a different plane than the plane you're on. So, yeah, that and my sisters and my big family. I've got such a big family, you know, I just knew how sad they would all be, and what you're saying as well, and knowing that I hadn't lived to my potential, even though I'd lived a pretty good life, I hadn't really got out of my comfort zone to test myself on what else I can achieve and what other talents I might have, you know, and yeah, that scared me more than anything. That I just was sad about that.
Another very deep question, another personal, but I know it's very hard to get through. But again, I think it's important that we do talk about these things, because at the end of the day, we all have to consider these types of consequences, whether it be as, you know, detrimental as what you went through, or just in general, we all have to think about what's going to be left of us when you know, we move along with our lives. You know, what can we leave for others? How can we ensure that our loved ones will have something there to remember us by and be secured by?
Yeah.
It's a book, and, you know, it could be anything else, but it's very powerful to think about. So.
Yeah, it is. And since then, which has been so beautiful and humbling, both my daughters, one at her wedding, so now I'm a grandmother.
Oh,
I was told I wouldn't see my grandchild or my kids get married. Or when I say I was told that in sort of other terms, you haven't got long to live. So my daughter at her wedding, in her speech, said, you know, my mum's the most amazing, confident person I know, that inspires me every day to, you know, be the best I can be. And that's so beautiful. And my other daughter, wrote it in something for her work. They had a snapshot on her, and one of the questions was, who's your hero or whatever? And she said, you know, my mum, she's amazing, and she got through this, and she did this, and she did that. And look, I don't, you know, I balk when people say you're amazing. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just getting through it. But when your kids, you know, you're inspiring your kids, you're being a good role model, I think that's, you know, a beautiful thing. So I've gone on to be able to be that. Had I have died, I wouldn't have done those things. I'm sure they still would have thought I was great and amazing and missed me. But it's just been, it just really spurred me on to go, well, hey, like you're saying, what legacy do I want to leave? And what sort of role model do I want to be to my kids? And I'm certainly not perfect in many ways. I have fun, I have a good life, but yeah, it's the balance. And yeah, I just thrive to learn new things and set out to do new things every day, really.
I mean, you know, you've not only overcome this, but you're making the most of it now, and it's been many years since all of this, and here you are thriving, meeting your grandchildren, and, you know, trying new things. It's an incredible story to think about. So all of our listeners right now, I mean, if this is inspiring to you as well as it is to me, you should check out this book, Patient 71, because it's an amazing way to show how no matter what life throws at us, keep going and don't just give up. Try your hardest to accomplish what needs to be done. Julie, I'm wondering if anybody wants to get in touch with you or check out your speaking engagements or perhaps even book one, where can they go to find out more information about you and get in touch?
Okay, so I'm having my website's being redone at the moment. I am on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm not amazing at social media, to be honest with you, but I am on there, so Instagram, and hopefully my website will be up soon. Look, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, I don't mind if they get in touch with you and you share my email address with them. And yeah, and probably what I'd like to say too is I remember when I did write the book and I was writing the book that I was told that it's almost impossible to get a mainstream publisher. And so I didn't even try. And I originally publisher from Cyprus. I was so green about publishing a book and I paid down quite a bit of money. Anyway, that went a little bit pear-shaped, but I ended up getting a mainstream publisher and so, you know, don't ever think that your book's not good enough to be published or someone, you know, might pick it up because, yeah, if you don't have a go, you won't know. And so that's another message, you know, I'd like to share because, yeah, I ended up getting published with Hachette in Australia. And in America, I went with the independent publisher. So, yeah, Woodhall Press. So, yeah.
Yeah, and again, another reason not to let anything deter you from writing your book, right? If you want to have your book and you want to get it out there, there's many options these days. You can self-publish, you can get on Amazon. I mean, here at Authors on Mission, we have many different packages where we allow, you know, you're able to choose kind of how you would like it marketed and how would you like, you know, how you want to get it out there. So many different ways you could choose from. It's easier than ever now. And I know it's a big challenge, you know, from the start, but if you think about it, there's many different people out there who can help you. So I'm kind of just speaking to listeners who might be inspired. You know, you can always book a consultation with us and, you know, we'll help you get that story out there, because if it's as important as, you know, it is to you, it's going to be important to other people as well. And
that's exactly right. Like if your story is important to you enough that you want to write it down, it definitely other people will resonate with your story. And I can tell you that for sure, because the amount of people that have resonated with mine, and not only because of illness or the cancer journey, but I've had readers go and do things that they never would have done. Somebody wrote to me and said that they were scared of, you know, they would never been on a plane in their life. They were like 40 something. They read my story and got on a flight and flew somewhere because they thought they were inspired to just do something that was hard and that they didn't want to do, you know. So,
that's amazing. It must be so heartwarming to hear those stories, even unexpectedly in your inbox each day.
Oh,
that's amazing.
Yeah, I still get them, and from Australia, and the book's been out 7 years here. And it was like, I'll get, you saved my life, because somebody thought outside the box or looked overseas for better treatments. So it was, you know, I'm like, wow, you know, to have that impact on people. And anyone writing a book and the listeners now can have that impact on other people going through or having the same story as you have, or a similar story. You know, it's not always the same, but just being generally inspired by people for what they've gone through, and then to sit down and write it is a whole other story. And if you can do, you know, go through both those things, then nothing's that hard anymore, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah,
for me, dying was the hard part.
Well, of course.
Yeah, everything else is a little bit easier.
Yeah, well, Julie, I mean, thank you so much for all these strategies and tips and really, you know, emotional and raw feelings that you shared with us today. I think that our listeners are going to take a lot of impact and meaning from this and hopefully translate it into their own lives as well and become inspired by you, just like that woman you said who went on the plane for the first time.
Yeah.
Considering all of this, I wonder if you have one last piece of, you know, either advice or an actionable step our listeners can take after they finish with this podcast today. What kind of guidance might you want to steer them in, having heard your story, somebody who might be inspired to write their own book or perhaps make a change? Any last thoughts to our listeners?
Okay. Look, number one, very, very simple. If you want to write, and I'm assuming a lot of people that watch this podcast are interested in books and writing, sit down and start. It's as simple as that. It's like, once you get a flow on, as I said, when I wrote that date, and that date was so meaningful to me, and I was actually in hospital at the time, which is funny. I just had a minor thing that happened and I had to stay in hospital for a week. And as soon as I wrote that first line, it was 21st of June, 2012. Something just came over me to just keep going. So just write that first sentence. Even if you started off, most things, if it's a memoir type thing, something happened on a certain date, even if you start off with the date, doesn't mean it's going to end up that way, because it will get edited and whatever. But yeah, just write. That would be number one. And two is, don't put things off. Don't put things off. If you really want to do something, just start doing it. Make time for it, because I learned the hard way. I'm not saying that this is going to happen to everyone. It's not. However, the message came loud and clear, is like, live a great life. Work on your talent. Like, if you've got talents, and everyone has, like, I've found out that I can get up and speak on a stage, and I didn't die. I think what happens is the caveman style thought is like, the fear comes over you. The fear comes over you in a way because basically your subconscious mind is trying to keep you safe. But that's outdated. It's outdated. You're not going to die if you sit down and start writing.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's something that everybody right now, when they're finished listening to this podcast, can go ahead and do themselves. If they're inspired in any way to write their book, turn ahead right now to your computer and start typing something. Or if you're listening to this in the car, switch to your notes app, start dictating something. Every little step matters.
Even the good old pen.
There you go, yes.
That's how I start. I wrote my first 9 chapters with a pen.
Hey, whatever works, whatever method is best for anybody. There's values and benefits to all different types, and I can go on forever. But at the end of the day, you're right. It's all about just getting started and not procrastinating, and being, again, like we talked about before, raw, authentic with your book and your writing, and that's how you're going to truly resonate and get your message across. So I appreciate everything that you've shared with us. You know what, everybody, as we start to wrap today, Julie, I just want to thank you again. This has been a remarkable talk that we had today. You've had a remarkable journey in general in life. So, your story just shows us sometimes the most powerful books, they come from the most challenging moments. And to all of our listeners, you can find Patient 71 in bookstores and online.
This is the cover of my book. Can you see that? It's dedicated to my husband, who was my biggest supporter.
We're going to put links to that in the description of this podcast as well, along with your contact information to reach out to Julie if you want to, tell her how she's inspired you, or perhaps reach out for any advice. She's here to help. But until our next podcast, everybody, I'm Danielle Hutchinson, the Chief Creative Officer of Authors on Mission. This has been a podcast with Julie Randall. And until next time, remember, your story matters. Keep writing, keep leading, keep inspiring. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you next time. This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.